But to make this a little bit easier, because this will be kind of our session 2 image, right? And the other one that I showed you will be, I'll let you play with that and practice on that. But what we're going to start with is, let me find the image. I thought I put it in here. Hold on one second. Let me go see if maybe I didn't give it the right extension. It's an actual kind of lace image that we can use. That one should be up here anyway. And there it is. I wonder what it is. It should be a JPEG. Okay, let me see if I can open up in here. If not, I'll go resave it. Because it says all image files. And it should be giving me that. There it goes.
Okay.
Okay, let's see if I can open up this. File format not supported. Okay, hold on. You guys get together. All right, so what we're going to start with is this image that better show up now. There we go. Just to make sure I have the right one, we'll go like this. There we go. Because this gives us a guide to go with, okay? Now, this is done on netting. This is done more on like an organdy fabric or, a very, very frail fabric. You could even use, like an organza with it, okay? But, this gives you an idea of what you can do. And if you look, if you look down here at what's going on, it's not really a satin stitch, right? It's more of kind of like a complex fill in some ways. It's not a blanket stitch either. But let me go to 101 because we're going to have to enlarge this. I always love playing with this as I try to figure out where my mouse is. And let me find my Alt key here. Alt S. And it's not going to, well, is it going to let me do it or not? Nope. Okay, hold on. Let's go over to the image file and try this one again. Resize. There we go. Okay, I want to resize this much bigger. Okay, so when I look at this, we'll start with the bottom one, mainly because it's more interesting, right? But, this one is something to look at too, because this is done, really when you come down to it, we can do that with a satin stitch. And that's what that is a little satin stitch. But when we look at how this is done, this is a very thin satin stitching. This is also very thin satin stitching. But this we could do probably with our steel stitch, right? So,
yeah.
If you want to start with the border,
More control with the steel stitch.
right, you can come in here and we're just going to adjust the width. And you have to decide, like, where do you want to start? I would probably leave that little overlap there. And, you're just going to do basically left click, right click. My mouse is flaking out. Left click. That's all there is to it. Left click, right click, left click. That's it. All the way across to make that border, right? And I'll make a little bit of this. Hold on. Okay, so I am going to zoom in too. And let me redo this. Hold on. Zooming in helps quite a bit because at least you can see what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I left clicked up there, and then I would do a right click pretty close to it. So you can come down and left click, right click, and keep your left clicks as even as you can, right? And your right clicks as even as you can. And see where I'm kind of, when I go like that and I loop into it, you want to avoid that. So if you need to, backspace, backspace, and adjust that left click. You may have to left click and then place the left click close to it to keep it from looping. Okay, see what I'm doing? There's 2 left clicks now to keep it from looping back on itself. Okay, see what's going on? If I do just a left click here and come immediate up to this right click, see how that's looping right there? Okay, so when that happens, it didn't happen on this first section because of the way that came in. When that happens, you want to come down here and do a left click, and right next to it, another left click. So then when you come up here, see it doesn't loop? So it's 2 left clicks. Left click, slide over a little bit, left click, right, left click, and that'll stop that from looping on those arcs, those tight arcs like that.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense now? Because what you're doing is you're putting a little bit of space in between them, but the steel stitch is going to overlap. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. And see what we've got now is you almost have like an overlap there, but it'll work out good, where here I don't have that, where I just put that 1 left click. Does that make sense to you guys? This is a much more workable base than this one would be.
Yes.
And what do you do with that one that's come down, the first one?
You could do that basically by going left click, or what we did find out is if we go into our vertex select here, let me change the color of this so we can see better too. If we come into our vertex select, right, and then turn on my little show beads here, I actually can right click on that and convert it to a smooth point or straight point. If we convert it to straight, it'll, come into that. And if we convert it to smooth, let me see what it does here. Although personally, I probably would do that double click all the way across. If we convert it to smooth, it's a little more manageable maybe, right? And, I'd want to arc this out a little bit, just to kind of keep this even. Now that's manageable because this other base is going to go across it. Okay? But this cannot handle, this fabric's not going to hold 8,000 stitches. So what I'm going to have to do is go into my settings. I don't want it maybe that wide. I could probably get away with 1.5 millimeters in width, okay? See the difference in the width? I can even probably go down to 1 millimeter. But if I go to 1 millimeter, I'm definitely not going to want a whole ton of stitches in there. So on the satin, we want this standard fill. And we have to decide, is it 1 notch over or 2? Because, the density here is a little different, right? So on our pull compensation, we still want to give it a little pull compensation. I'm not going to change that value here. On our underlay, I would go ahead and put a contour and 1 perpendicular line to build a little bit of a support base for it. All right, so that's going to be like the edge run and a center run, right? And then, of course, we want to put our lock stitch. And this is what we end up with. That's going to be too thin. So, no problem. Just go back in here and bump your satin back up. Because I went down 2 notches. And that's with it being 1 millimeter. Okay, I know we would have to do some adjustments here. I would probably go back to 1.5 or 1.75 millimeters on this. See? And, you might do a little bit of adjustment, in here. Slide that over a little bit or pull it up a little bit and see how that evens out. And whatever setting you use for this, okay, is the same setting you're going to use, or maybe a little bit wider setting for this line, which is going to seal that up.
Did everybody's screen freeze? There you go. I was going to say, my screen seemed like it froze up or something.
Yeah,
I keep losing you altogether.
Yeah, and see, my screen's here, so it's got to be an internet issue. And we've got those storms coming in that, went across Oklahoma, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, okay, so here's my steel stitch again. I would try, 1.5, maybe 1.75, maybe. Same thing. We now know to take it down 1 notch. Pull compensation percentage.
So would you do a run stitch back and use that as part of the underlay?
Yeah, or,
Yeah,
or, you can put your in and out point, and save a step, right? And, of course, I would do, my basic stitch here. Like, instead of doing a run stitch back, you could just start it down here and end it.
Yeah, and end it down there as well. Yeah,
Right, and
same
save
thing.
yourself a step. Now this one, you could probably go ahead and make that one maybe 2 millimeters, right? And that one's not going to hurt at all. So, that's a very easy, way to make that border. You could even, if you wanted to, make segments here. And, this piece isn't finished, but, pretend like we've got a segment. You could make a segment, and you could, copy and paste that segment in.
Finish it down where that little running stitch is down to the snowdrop. And then you could go down and do the snowdrop.
Well, I'm talking about like making this border. Let me zoom in a little bit, like in here. Okay, so if
No, I was just
copy-
thinking if you finish the segment on the snowdrop, you could go down and do it, couldn't you? And then come back and do the next section.
You could.
And
You could come back, but you would have a...
because it's got that little joining thing over there.
Right. You would have to come down, do this whole snowdrop, come back around and do this section, then come back up. So you would be doing it in sections. So, or, you could do the copy and paste instead of, if you get one segment that you like, right, do copy and paste. Instead of punching this whole row, do a copy and paste. Make sure your in and out points are in the same spot. So you could just make this row. Like, I started with that one funny little section, but I could always adjust it pretty easily, right? And, just make sure that your in and out points coincide. And hold on, I gotta get into move my controls. Because that pasted on top, so let's move that down. Okay, so that would be a quicker way of doing that rather than doing the whole, the whole row here. And it would give you more consistency, right? Because when you really look at this whole thing is nothing but a repeat. Now, it's up to you if you want to come down and do this whole segment, because the repeat, if you see right here, there's a little stitch in there.
Yeah.
Okay, the repeat is down here. Generally lace or, kind of symmetrical patterns with lace, have a repeat. So the repeat is actually this. This is one lace segment right there. So you could do one whole lace segment and copy and paste it over, but it gets a little more complicated about where your in and out points are, right? Or you could do this, and the size of your hoop, put your hoop up, so you can see, and then, decide where you come back into this, right? Because, like, even though they have, like, this little jump here, remember, they're making one segment, and then, they're reversing that, so you'd end up doing this twice. They're reversing the process and coming back up here and jumping and probably traveling and finish that next segment, right? So you can do it that way if you want. It's probably the better way to digitize it. It's just going to take you a little bit longer, and you have to think about that process, right? But, that is an option. So, something to think about. Find the repeat and then figure out, how to reverse and do two segments. Then you can just copy and paste the two segments, right? But, that is, that would, you might, this is a pretty reasonable density. You could take out some of the underlay, like, do I need that center run? Do a test stitch on your fabric and see if it supports it. You definitely want the edge run because you have to give this some, definition. You have to give it some boundaries, like rope stretching something across, right? You have to give it those boundaries, or it'll just suck up that fabric real tight, right? So, you guys have any questions so far?
I can't wait to get started on it.
See, I love when she's so optimistic. Okay,
Yes.
To make this
I was just thinking,
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Before I started doing the webinars with you, I would have looked at that and find it so daunting. Now I look forward to doing it instead. And I don't find it daunting because my brain's sitting here working out how I'm going to do it already.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas before it was like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. Thank you, Bernie.
Okay. Well, thank you. That makes me feel
Yes, yes, that's exactly. I feel that too.
Well, thank you guys.
Bernie,
That
if
makes
you
me feel
to
good.
make this go, to make this go where we would do, say we did the long hoop and we did it, you know, let's just say 6 inches, and then we needed to do another 6 inches. Would we use that like the continuous hoop?
Yep. Put your marks
place
in.
the V's and
Yep.
okay.
Put your marks
okay.
in and make sure you know where this is going to start, right? Like if you do this whole row over, right? And then this bottom row over, you know, make sure you know where this starts, because we know it starts up here. And, you know, make sure you know where it ends, because you're going to have to line up the V where you start. Not in the center, where you start. Because you're going to want to make sure that that needle drops right down where it's supposed to, so that it picks up in a continuous manner. Okay? So, like if you
So we
started,
kind of need to think about that. Yeah.
right. Like make sure you know where you're going to
have that
stop
back.
and where you're going to start. Like even if you end up, oops, I had that slid over so good. Even if you end up like you do this whole run and you end up stopping right here, right? Then see where I have that half one at that one beginning section, right? And I have this one. Let me zoom out 1 to 1. Okay, see I have the half one here. My mouse is flaking out. Hold on. If I have the half one here, right here, right? And then I have that half one here. Okay, I want to make sure that there's some overlap. So I'm going to extend that one a little bit when I finish it. And I'm going to put my V so that the point of that V is right there. Because I want it to, you know, be set in a little bit so that I know that those connect well. And what you might want to do is run a basting stitch down and make sure that this is also going to line up properly in case your fabric shifted a little bit, right?
I cannot wait to get started on it.
See, I knew you'd be so excited.
I could give a rat's ass about doing that.
And
Nancy!
So thankful. I just worry about her.
I'm telling ya. But see, this would be gorgeous, Nancy, on one of your quilts.
Burning.
It would be gorgeous as a border. Think about that.
Listen, I started whipping on the binding with my hand. I couldn't get the needle to do anything with that finger of mine. No. I finally called a woman and said, would you please put binding on for me? I can't do it.
Well, see, what you could do with this, right? You don't even have to sew it on to your quilt. Just put the, you know, organza in the border section, right? On top of your fabric.
I am through with that quilt, and I'm not going to do any more to it.
All right. Anyway, even if you don't make lace, Nancy, this
The
is...
feeling she didn't want to talk about that anymore.
Yeah. Even if you don't make lace, though, Nancy, this is still, like, good digitizing practice, right? So
Well,
I'll be happy
try
if you
it.
make, like, one tulip and you get this part done. How's that?
Yes, ma'am. I'll do
One section, Nancy.
Yeah, one section.
The thing that gets me, this hasn't been done in sections because if it had, where you see your little starting thing, your little starting leaf, for want of a better word.
Right. See,
The
here.
others that, they don't, but the leaves haven't got a join down them. That one there, where you've got your thing.
Okay, see
your
that
cursor.
that little lump?
It doesn't
right
have
there?
a join down the leaf, so they're not completely done that way. So,
Well, it does, because what they're doing is...
but it's got to run there, but it hasn't got. See
Right.
how it starts at the half of that one,
Right, but here's what they're doing. Ready? They're coming down.
Yeah.
They're doing, this in here. You can see the run lines hidden underneath.
Yeah.
Okay? And then they're
And then they
coming
do the
down
lot.
here, and then they're running, and they're doing this. And then they'll come up, and they'll, probably travel up here and come down. And then there's a little connector. See the little connector right in here?
Yeah.
So, there is a connector here, and there's a connector here, but ignore that for a second. They're running down along this line. I'll use this as an example, okay? They're running along here, and they're saying, okay, do this, do this, although that connector, I think they're going here, and then coming back and going here down to here, and probably
They're
running.
not digitizing it in one little section.
Yeah, they did it in sections. I know it
Excuse me.
doesn't look like it, but they did it in sections because here's the joiner right there where it joins into that next section. And here's a joiner.
Yeah.
And, so that's how, they did it in sections. You can see like that little bobble of extra thread. So,
I didn't until you circled it, but I do now.
yeah. And see,
All right.
I'm looking, uh-huh.
All right. If you go up at the top, where it connects that upside down tulip, go up.
Right here,
All right. Go all the way up that stem
right here.
right there. Now, come back down
Okay.
to the bottom tulip, all the way down to this bottom tulip in the middle. Do you see that line comes all the way down there?
Okay, right here.
Yes. From the very top all the way down.
Well, it looks like it, like on the screen, but, probably, you can see the line here, right? And
Right.
they probably did this tulip here and did the little French knot, right? And then it's double traveled, so they traveled back up and then traveled maybe over. But there's a double travel, on both of these, right? So traveling down and they're traveling up. So, that could have been a straight direct down to here, or they could have traveled over and started doing, this section here, right? And then come back up and traveled down and traveled back up too. It looks like they may have gone directly straight down. But, you never know, because see here it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's just extra thread coming up, right?
Well, how come that third one doesn't look like it has a connection at all?
It does. It's got a connection right here.
No, go over to the upside, to the carrots. Go to the carrots.
Right here.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have a connection. This
Yeah.
one does not, because when they came down, right, they came down this one, traveled over, did that one and came back, right?
Yeah.
Traveled up here, or probably started from here and then jumped back up. So, if they, when they came down here, if you look down here, you can see like a little bobble of thread.
Right.
They traveled up and then came back down and did that one, and then they just started from here and then jumped back in. So that one didn't need it.
That center one, that's not done in halves like the very first one. So that's not like they didn't do it in sections per se of half a one there.
They probably did. They probably
I
did.
can't. Can you see it?
Because this is where your join is, right here.
Yeah, I can see that, but it didn't make any sense because I can't see where that center one is split.
They may have just done this, right? And
After
when
the first
you
one.
do the repeats, like when you do a repeat, it's not always super logical, right? Like they may have done this, come down here, done to here, done this whole thing right here, right? And, this is your first repeat. So then your second one would be here to here, okay? And then, like that. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
Okay.
Leave your yellow up there.
But the
Right.
first one, they didn't. They split it in half.
Well, that's just the image where it was cut.
So we're assuming that that wasn't a half, it was a whole.
Right. It depends on where, like the edge of, when you cut fabric, you might cut
Because
through
if you're going to do a continuous hoop, you have to have somewhere for them to line up.
Right.
That would make perfect sense because there's less sewing anywhere else in that section.
Right in here. But probably, probably you would do it like this would not be included in that first run. You would
No.
do this, up to here, right?
Huh.
And then repeat that. Or you could make these 3 sections, let me slide over, well, I can't really slide. Or you would do your run like this, like bring it, hold on, let me erase these and redo this. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. Ultimately, what you have to come up with is, how do you want to do your repeat? Because however you do your repeat, right? Like if you make your repeat as this, starts from, basically here, right?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me undo that. I needed my marker. Let me find something that maybe isn't as chunky as that marker.
Let me ask you one other question, Bernie, before you do anything else.
Uh-huh.
If you look at this and you get the upside down tulip and come down and do the 3 bells
Right.
on the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and you leave the upside down carrots or the carrots,
Uh-huh.
and after you have done everything, all of these, come back and put the carrots in there, copy and paste the 3 carrots.
Mm-hmm. You could
Did
do
you do
that.
that?
You could, because what you've got is, ultimately, this is where the main repeat is, right? Whoops, sorry. Right here. This is your main repeat, right here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but if you look at this border on the bottom right here, right, that's only attached to the carrots. So, is it a big deal if you, finish your repeat like here, right? Is it a big deal to jump and do this and add the carrot pieces here, right? And come back down and finish this border. It's not going to be that big of a deal because this isn't standalone lace, so it doesn't matter if these are connected up in here. Does it make more sense now?
Yes. But you could do it that way.
You could. You could also, let me erase things. I like this pen tool better. You could also look at this and decide, okay, I'm going to do this, right? This section here, okay? And you could come and you could, do a run line here, travel, get all these pieces, travel back around, build your underlay on that main stem, right? Because you travel several times. You come back and travel back up, right? And then come up and do this piece, and then lay this in afterwards, right? And treat
Mine
that
is
whole
going to
bottom.
be exquisite.
See? And you could treat that whole bottom section, whatever you think is a little bit easier for you to do. But it is kind of a logic process, Meg, I know, is thinking how she connects everything. But sometimes, if you're overwhelmed, just getting this section done is okay, right?
I know, I figured it out.
But,
Yeah, can I leave now and start?
no. But one thing that you guys have to think about, right, is, when you're doing this, what you have to think about is if you're going to, do a run where, now that we're zoomed out, if this is going to be your repeat right here, okay, you are going to have to remember that this section has to be down here, at the end of this, right? And it needs to be missing from here.
Yeah.
Okay? This is like a
Good.
puzzle. How does
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, how does this all fit together? So you've got to make one repeat and decide how it's all going to fit together. And the way I test that, to be honest, because even though, like on, visually you think, oh, this is great, and half the time you're just, glad that you got the design done, right? The way to test it is to select all of this, copy and paste it, and line it up right here on the edge. So you're making a border on your screen, and then you can see where you have to adjust on each end. Okay? And so does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. I found it was easier to copy and paste one section than to try and do it equally to match.
Right.
You
If
know
you
what I
just
mean?
make
Like
one
it matched
section,
up better.
right.
Yeah,
If you
it
make
matched
one
up better.
section, that's why, like I said on the border, sometimes it's easier to copy and paste, right? But a more logical way maybe to start is ignore this first piece. And, make your decision. Is this where, this going to be your run right here? You know what I mean?
But
And
then
then,
you've got the tulip in there.
well, you've got
The
the
flower head.
carrots, you've got these, you've got all of this. Yeah, and then you can, you're ignoring this section, right? This is, basically you're going to go from where this jump is over to here. You would start here, right? And it may look a little bit goofy because here's this big giant run in here. And I'm just going to highlight. Okay, so you would start here, right? This, and then all of your flower here, right? And then this would be, not that part right there, but that would be maybe one run, one section. So then you would just copy all of that, paste it over, and you find out right away if you've got an error in your logic when this section doesn't line up with the next pasted section.
I'm going to start the way they've started there on the cut piece.
Okay. Because you'll have to, you can line up with that cut down here too. You'll just have that little extra, like, overlap in it.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot less to worry about joining up.
Straight is always better. The only problem is if you're going to do it straight, make sure that you do a based line from your
Yep,
V
absolutely. Yep.
to make sure everything is going to line up.
When you stitch it. Yep.
Right. And
Because there's not a lot to join up, is it?
Nope.
No, there's not.
So,
I'm going to have to go back and look at the webinar on the V's because I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't take much.
The V's are easy.
Notice.
I didn't.
Here's how the V's work.
I didn't
Ready?
get that. Okay. Good.
Okay, if we're going to start, like if our starting point, let me draw our little starting point, is going to be right here, right?
Right.
Like it starts with that stitch right here. Then what we do is pretend, let me go change my pen color. Okay. If I know that that's where I have to line up is right there or, right here, whichever, just make sure you know where you need to line up, right? Come over to this manual punch tool, not the running stitch, the manual punch tool.
Right.
Because that's going to give you, the width. Your V, the point of your V is where the needle is supposed to go. So you would bring, click here, come down and click right where your needle's supposed to be one time, right? And come back.
Right.
And you just come back to that exact point and back. So you've done it twice to make sure that it catches is what the reason is. Okay?
Right.
Okay.
So that's where you're going to start, which means this would stitch first. And then, then your embroidery would stitch, right? Because you need this point to line up with the end. Okay, so just remember on this side, if this is the direction you're going, if this is the direction that border's being sewn, then this end, that V stitches first. On this end, where you end, right, maybe your last stitch is right there, you make the same V at the end of your sewing. So when you go to stitch this next section, that V is going to line up with the next V up here that's going to stitch. Does that make sense?
Mm. Would
Yes.
you do one down the
Now,
bottom as well
before-
with something like this?
I would do a basting stitch because you want to make
Just
sure,
the
like,
basting.
right, because, you know,
That it's straight.
right. And, you know, that's kind of, you know, the ultimate problem is if I did a V down here, maybe it would line up, you know, but I would do from this point here on the V,
Yeah.
I would do
a
the basting stitch down.
Mm.
And
Straight.
make sure that, yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like in the other seminar, you did a copy and paste on that V, and then you moved it. And
Right, right. I
I
moved
might
it
be
into
remembering
position.
this wrong. But
Now-
now that right, and that makes more sense to me right there. Okay.
Yeah, you've got one V that has to stitch
Okay.
before your design stitches so that you can line up with, you know, the
And one
end.
after.
And then one that's going to stitch
Yeah.
at the very end
Right.
so you have
And
that mark to
is
line
easy.
up with.
That's a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Good. Good. Okay.
All right.
That's
So now
good.
does that
Got
make
that.
sense to everybody on lining that up with the V?
Yep. Yep.
Miss Nancy?
Absolutely, it is just breathtaking. I can't wait to find my multiple hoops so I can just go right to town.
You know, I love you.
I have never used the V, so I have no earthly idea. Megan, I wish
You
you lived
used the
next door.
V. You did in that seminar when we did continuous hooping. We did the V.
I know it, and I've never used it since.
Oh, I'm just shocked. Now, remember, you can also print your template, right? And use the
Yeah.
template
Right.
as a, you know, as an aligning tool as well. But the V's are a little more accurate.
Well, you just wait till next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nancy, I've been taking that quilting class, the EQ7, and I've just been having so much fun. And I understand why you like quilting so well. I see your passion on that now.
Well, it is wonderful. I can do that, and to heck with this stuff. If I can buy that, I'll pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
At 72 years old, I just soon purchase it as to sit here and twist my brain all up. I love you, Bernie, for trying to teach me.
You know I love ya. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of whip these in here. Remember that double left click down here.
Yep.
Keep that from looping, okay? And that's something to keep in mind for anything you're doing that's real tight like this.
And where do you do the double click?
See where, see where my mouse is right now? I'm going
Yes.
to right click up here to make a curve, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to left click and then move just over a little tiny bit, left click, so that I'm not looping back on myself.
Right. I got that. I can do that.
See? You're doing pretty good there. Okay, so let me get over here, and just so we kind of have something that looks, like a semblance of a design here. All right, so remember to go in, change this, and you have to play with this, 1.75 might be what you like better, right? But this is where you're going to have to be careful, like one notch down is good. Don't forget your pull compensation. And on your underlay, contour may be enough, which is going to be like those two lines, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of like a little better base, so, I'll probably put one perpendicular line underneath this. And don't forget to lock.
Now, we're doing this on the embroidery machine on really fine thing.
Yep.
We are using a number 75 needle.
75 needle, they do have smaller needles, but you can't use your threader with them.
Right. I don't have any smaller needles.
And you use what kind of thread? Rayon?
I use rayon because it's a little more, it's a little softer hand, right?
And do you use a lightweight?
Rayon?
Yeah.
Just the 40 weight. They have 60 weight, which is a little more, it's a little less bulky, but you'd have to play with your density because that's going to give you a whole different look, right? And it's a little bit harder to find. Like I want to point out up here is what you want to make sure of is because that satin stitch is going to be so narrow up here, you're going to want to make sure that when you punch these, that these are going to be covered by that, satin stitching on the top, right?
Yeah.
Okay, see how
So
this one would be.
you could use a cotton too for heirloom.
You
Yes.
could. There's 60 weight cottons out there. There's 50 weight cottons. Do a little test stitch before you commit to, density with the different thread type because those are going to behave different too. Okay, so when you punch this, you're going to want to make sure that, you've got, all of your points so that they're going to be, held somewhat in place. Even though this isn't standalone lace, you don't want sloppy like this not catching up here, right? So, zoom in, especially if you're only going to do one segment because doing something real small like this, it's probably easier to zoom in to do it in the first place, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and...
More and more important as time goes along.
Yeah. Well, and what I find, this is my excuse, even though, I'm getting a little bit older, right? The computer screens are getting much larger.
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little, yeah. The computer screens are getting larger and larger, and while that's great if you want to see your whole screen, what that means is that I have this big giant screen, and this is not generally, as easy to see. When we had the smaller screens and the smaller resolution, things were kind of, zoomed up on top of you a little bit better, right? So, now, when we're coming down to do this next section, I would do my run for this up to here. Okay, and I would go ahead and finish that loop so that there's that overlap. I'm not going to get stressed out if there's that overlap because you can see up here that, that's probably where they overlap looking at this. That's kind of messy. I think I'd rather have a pretty beefy overlap rather than that wimpy overlap they have here, right? So I'm going to finish that, and, then I would do, that little run section, and then I would do, the little line here, right? Then I would come down in here, and I'm not going to use a very short stitch length. Here's my run tool. If I look at my stitch length, the default setting is 3. That's pretty good, right? I don't want it at 2. So, then you're going to come down here, and see that double look on that stitching? What you're seeing is the bobbin thread on the back. That's what that double look there is. That's bobbin thread.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, you're going to want to match your bobbin thread up. But, you're going to travel very carefully, and I would, come all the way down. And this is Nancy's favorite thing. These are the French knot things. You can do French knots here if you want, or you can just do a circle. But if you're going to do a French knot, do it logically. Okay, I stopped here. Let me edit that a little bit. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just delete it. What I would do is do this French knot the way French knots are supposed to be done. Come down here, travel straight down here. You can see where it's a little heavier thread. It gives a little definition there, right? And come down to the end of where you want that French knot to be, because the French knot does not come back to the center. The French knot goes like this. It comes back and it goes over, okay, and over, and they're long stitches overlapping each other. See what's going on?
Okay, I didn't know how to do that.
And, so you want to be careful, but you want these long stitches going over top of each other. And then at some point you'll come back to the middle, pierce them, and jump back up into here to begin that fill stitch.
I want to see how you do that tulip.
Okay, hold on. See what the French knot looks like? And
Yes.
if you need to adjust it, not a big deal. You can pull some of these over, right, to make that a little more rounded.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that gives you a little more authentic looking French knot than, if you just did, a bunch of, back and forth kind of things, right?
Mm.
All right, so there's my French knot. Let me turn off the thing so you can see it. See? It's a little bit bigger, because I pulled those all out. But remember, it's going to, some of that is going to pull in too. So do a little test stitch and decide what you want, or if you don't like that, then consider just doing a little circle. Okay, now on this is nothing more, believe it or not, than a complex fill. The difference is it's on sheer fabric, so and it's got a low density. So you are seeing, some of the fabric behind it, and you're also seeing some of your stitches, like your bobbin stitching behind it. So, when I do this tulip, you could, because you've got the running stitches here, you could do this whole thing as a complex fill, and you could do this as one piece. This looks like it's split, but it's really, if you look at that stitching, it's all going in the same direction, right?
Mm.
So what this is, this is just going to be your complex fill. And I'm going to auto close. And, let's go ahead and hit enter. And where do I want to start it? I would start it here. I'd go ahead and end it right here, I think. And the stitch direction's looking good this way. All right, now I'm going to come up to my settings. And I'm going to say, I just want my regular pattern. You could try some of these other patterns, like pattern 6 maybe, right? I'm going to drop the density down, and I'll try 2 notches. It might be too heavy. Pole compensation goes to percentage. Underlay, I just want a contour underlay. No perpendicular on this.
Mm.
Okay, and I don't even have to lock this one because I'm going to immediately pick up stitching. But, it's always a good habit to get in or a good thing. See that the 2 is too much. And you can see there's my perpendicular right there, which we can hide actually a little bit more. So, I'm going to bring my density back up. On my underlay, see where it says distance of 6.6? We're going to make that a distance of 0.4. And watch what happens to that line right here. Okay? Okay, that's a little bit better. I probably would pull this up a little bit more because
That looks better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
You lost the point though.
Yeah, but you know what? That's what editing's for, right? So I would come up here and I would say, that needs to come up here a little bit more, and something like that, right? Okay, now I ended here. I could just as easily end here, except I've got that travel stitch then. See? That's why you want to, end at opposite ends. You don't want to travel stitch. So, let's see where the travel stitch disappears underneath there. Okay, now, I could use a steel stitch. I could use a satin stitch. I'll probably just go ahead and use the steel stitch because this has a little bit of an outline to give it definition in a satin stitching. Okay. And I can auto close. All right. And then, then you're just going to keep adjusting. Like, I don't need this to be wide. And I definitely don't need it to be, as dense. So I can drop that density down. I may even be able to go to 2, but I'm not going to push it there. Pull compensation percentage. Underlay, I don't need any. And I definitely want to lock. Okay, see? And I could probably drop the density down a little bit more, except I would be afraid to. I could probably drop the stitch width down too, because if you look over here, that stitch width right here is very narrow. So, you know, I might be able to get away with
yeah, but when you stitch it, it's going to go narrow anyway, isn't it?
probably. I could probably get away with 1 millimeter. Let me drop this density down one more and see what it does. I just generally don't like. That's not too bad. Maybe going to 1.5 millimeter with that stitch is good, right? See? Because I don't really want to, I just want to clean the edge up a little bit. And, you know, I'm a little bit off here. I would, you know, be a little bit neater, but you can see I'm a little off of the outline, right? But what it's just to give it some definition, right? That's it, just some definition. Now, I end here. Personally, I would do what they did to give it a little more character. I would start here with my run stitch, come down, come back up, and that's what we look like so far. What do you think?
Very nice.
Okay, so we're looking more and more like, you know, the design, right? And from here, you know, you're going to do your satin stitching to here, and then you're going to run this and come back and satin stitch down, and you're going to run this and come back, and then you're going to, you know, create this in the satin stitching, which is going to be with your column tool. Okay? So you have to make a decision. The steel tool is not going to give you what you need for that stem. You know, it's going to be harder to align. You're not going to be able to adjust as much. So when you come up to here, that's really when you want to look at using this column tool. And, you know, you're just going to pick up. It's going to be very narrow. And remember, every direction that you put this line is the direction of your stitching, right? But what this does on very narrow satin stitching is it elongates the stitch. That's why this tool kind of comes in handy on, especially on small satin stitching, because I can make this stitch a little longer, meaning it's going to behave a little more. I should have right-clicked, but, you know, meaning, see how I've got that angle going? Okay, that's going to give me some stitch length. So, you know, when you're using the column tool, remember, you know, every place you place that line, like this is going to give me a more extreme angle. But what it does is it gives me length on those stitches, because that's going to be a very narrow satin stitch, right? But if it's angled, it's a little bit longer stitch, which is going to, you know, behave a little bit better, right? It's also easier to align when you're stopping. Like I'm going to stop here, right? See that length? Okay, so, you know, here's my out point right here, right? You know, then you're going to take your run tool, and you're just going to run, you know, all the way here. You know, if you want to make sure that you're right on, if you stop there and go in and tell it to be a two-ply, it's going to come right back to here where you can just pick up your column stitch again. Okay. And you've got that angle going still, right? And, you know, same thing, you're going to come down to here. And, you know, I would not do it in 3D view. It's going to make that a little bit easier to align here. But then you're going to come down to here and do the same thing. You know, you stopped here, so you're just going to run. Go into your settings and tell it to ply, which brings it right back on top of of itself, rather than you trying to perfectly match those points, right? And then you're going to do, you know, your satin stitching, and you can control your in and out points here. So this one, you know, and you can see the angle. See what they did on that angle? You know, this one goes a little bit straighter because it's wider. But, you know, on that beginning one, that angle's longer because the stitch length side to side is very short. And, you know, from here, you know, I would be a little bit neater, but then you're going to drop your density. The difference is this is wider. I would probably put, contour definitely in perpendicular, 2 lines underneath this. The satin stitch, leave it standard, drop it down a little bit and say okay. And you're going to bring this down to here. So let me go out to 101 and 3D and turn off these beads so you can see everything. And, other than I haven't adjusted the densities here, right? Well, let me show you what happens when I adjust these densities on this angled satin stitch. See what happened on that first one? And let me get to this one. See what a difference it makes and how it's starting to line up now more with, ours is still a little bit heavier and a little bit thicker, but you can see it's, lining up, right? See? So that's looking pretty,
oh, yes.
But see this, anytime you have a very tight satin, like this I can't really do much about, I can't get the angle. Anytime I have a really tight satin, right, I might want to go at an angle just to stretch out that stitch length, right? Now, here's the funny part on this. I used the same density on this as I used on this, but I've got, the perpendicular lines, a couple perpendicular lines in here. So visually, it fills in some of the color, see? But it's not going to be any heavier, it just has the, stitching underneath it. And then since I ended here, I would just pick up the rest of that stem and come down, and the same thing here. I'm going to stop, travel, let it come back on itself and come down to here. And depending on where you want that break to be, I would probably come over here and include these 3 here with these bells, right? But, you've got to kind of remember there's a join here too, right? Because you can see where that join is. So your join would be different. Your join would be down in here, which would be okay just as long as you know where you're going to join so you can adjust that end. So you guys have any questions? So
Kind of like Meg, I want to get started on it.
Yes, Dad. Yes, indeed. Can't wait.
Yeah. 0 to 90. That's me. 0 to 90. That's me.
I'm laughing that hard I hit my head on the back of the chair.
Aw. See what you did, Nancy? See? Nah, it's teasing. Okay, now the one above this, because I'm going to send you this image. Remember, you're going to have to enlarge it. The one above it, just so you know how these flowers are done, they're just satin stitching. Really, truly, if you really come in and look at these, all they are is satin stitching with a circle in the middle. So, what you would do is use your column tool, decide where you're going to start, and it'd be like a left click, then you'd start kind of right-clicking here. You might want to put a little...
They've actually come out a bit, yeah. You can see, I thought they were just round circles, but they're not. They actually go in and out.
Yep. And, at some point you're going to have to, I should have left click like right in here, because you're going to want to left click to make that clear, the petals clear, right? But you can see when I added that extra step there, kind of, doesn't do what you want. So it's, all you need is that left click, right click to make that nice round petal, see? And you're just going to, go around and make a circle doing this and join the circle at the end. And then you're going to adjust your density. Right? And, tell it that you want some support. Like you do need some definition. So you want it to do the at least contour. In this case, you probably want a perpendicular too, but you absolutely want contour because it's got to define its area, its boundaries. And, from here you're just going to pick your out spot and start doing this netting. Or you might want to do the mesh later and just take the jumps, right? It's kind of up to you. I probably, there's a little circle in the middle too. What you could do is, do the circle, do the flower, travel down, do the circle, do the flower, travel. It's going to be a logical process on how you make that mesh in the middle. But that repeat is easy. It's very well defined, right? From here to here.
Yes.
And if you make one flower, you can cut and paste.
Right.
Right.
But,
it's just that one flower. You got to get going.
right. But you've got to remember where your in and outs are. You're going to have a bunch of jumps there. But if you look, this border, this flower connects to that border right there.
Mm-hmm.
But this flower, or this one could connect, depending on how you're doing it. This flower connects to the center.
There's your join up there. Yeah, it starts or ends up there, one or the other.
So, that's, this is really the only option you have unless you're taking a jump up to that top border. But down here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 options. So, all right, ladies. You all excited? I know Nancy's excited.
I can't wait.
It should be interesting.
Making plans.
All right, so now I'm also going to send you, the other image we did, if I can find it. Hold on, it's hiding behind here. This image here, so you can kind of play with it. Because this one is, if you get really frustrated with one of these, right? This image, is a little simpler image, right?
You think so?
Yeah, it's basically, one scroll flipped and moved. That's it. Because, see, this scroll is the same as this scroll, just flipped.
I can see that now. Wait a minute. No.
It's the same exact scroll done in 2 rows. And, so, you don't have as much worry about a repeat and, that kind of thing. It's just a matter of where you connect the scrolls. And, this is just done on a little, lace piece, basically.
So you can go down, you can do the second one, you wouldn't do the first one. The second one on the left, then do, flip it, drag it down, and then when you do the whole lot, you go and copy and flip it, and you've got the second row.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's basically it. And it's good practice for satin stitching, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. So I'll send that image along as well, and I'll send this one too. Although you're going to have to make this one much larger. It's very small. If you want to practice, maybe using like this one would be good. Or, if you're not worried about making like a border, you just want to do something like insertion lace, because you can do that too.
Yeah.
Playing with some of these. So I'll send that along as well. So, you guys...
Please do.
So,
I love you, Bernie.
I love
do
you
love
too.
you so much. Do you mind if I tease?
No, I'm used to you. I knew what you were like the first time I met you. I knew.
We missed it last couple of weeks.
We did.
Oh, we did. We
sing
have missed you, Nancy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
dear Bernie.
Why, thank you.
Happy birthday to you.